we are going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of our new Home and Energy Chats webinar series. My name is Heather Chandler, and I'm the owner and publisher of the Green and Healthy Maine Homes magazines. We are thrilled to have you here with us tonight for what I hope you will find to be a helpful conversation about the value of green home improvements and what is a green home worth. I would like to start by sharing a special thank you to our sponsors, including our presenting sponsor this year, which is Royal River Heat Pumps. Specializing in the comfort and efficiency of your home, Royal River Heat Pumps offers the highest quality electric heat pump installation and service in Maine. Call for a no-cost site visit with one of their design experts or check them out online at royalriverheatpumps.com. We would also like to thank our season sponsor, Bath Savings, a local Maine bank that proudly invests in the people, places, and businesses that make Maine strong. Bath Savings, your neighbor, your bank. So a quick overview of the evening. We are going to begin the webinar with a presentation from each of our panelists and then open it up to discussion and Q&A following the three presentations. So please submit any questions you have for our panelists using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to get to all of them. And a reminder that the webinar is being recorded, and we will be uploading the recording to our website, greenmainehomes.com. If you are unfamiliar with us, Green and Healthy Maine Homes is a multimedia brand dedicated to inspiring healthy, sustainable, energy smart, and future-ready Maine homes through our biannual print magazines and online business directory, monthly email newsletters, and an active social media presence. We share expert advice to inspire healthy, comfortable, affordable, efficient, and sustainable Maine homes. So please visit us at greenmainehomes.com to learn more. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists. Parlin Meyer is the director of BrightBuilt Home, a design firm in Portland, Maine that uses off-site construction manufacturers to build modified and custom versions of its high-performance home designs. After 10 years at sea as a licensed captain and deck officer, Parlin began a second career in the built environment by pursuing both a Master's of Architecture and a Master's of Real Estate Development from the University of Maryland. Welcome, Parlin. And next we will hear from Julia Bassett Schwerin. Julia is a certified green broker. She's a smart home expert, a second home property specialist, and an accredited buyer representative with Coldwell Banker Real Estate in Cape Elizabeth. She teaches continuing education classes for realtors who are looking to learn more about green and smart buildings. She serves on the board of the Greater Portland Board of Realtors and is secretary of their sustainability advisory group. And last but not least, Rob Lynch is the co-owner, the senior vice president and chief appraiser of United Valuation Group in Scarborough. He is a certified residential appraiser with more than 30 years of experience. He has appraised foreclosed properties, properties with unfinished shell improvements, million-dollar waterfront estates, properties on islands in southern Maine's Casco Bay, as well as energy efficient and high performance dwellings. So I am thrilled to have you all with us tonight. And at this point, I would like to open up our presentations with Parlin. So Parlin, take it away.
All right, thank you, Heather, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. So yes, as Heather said, as director of BrightBuilt Home, I've been part of the development of what we've been doing for 7 years now, which is really building new construction and specifically high performance net zero new construction. So as such, I can't speak specifically to the value of the renovations market, but I can speak to why it is we build high performance and why it's important to take into consideration a high performance renovation of your home and where the value is in doing that. So see the next slide. So this sort of lays the foundation for the premise for high performance homes and high performance buildings. This is, some of you may have seen before, this is provided by Architecture 2030, and it shows really a breakdown of what the global CO2 emissions are by primary sectors. As you can see, building operations and building materials and construction comprise over a third of this pie. So that's 1/3 of all of the global CO2 emissions is thanks to the buildings that we live in and the buildings that we heat and cool. Certainly, transportation and industry are the two other primary sectors, whereas the remainder of the pie is just 6% of everything else is comprised in that 6%. And transportation and industry certainly has a part in building buildings and in maintaining buildings. So it's almost a little bit skewed in this because in order to build a home, you need to engage with industry and use transportation to get it to your site. So really, buildings comprise of a more significant portion than just 1/3 of the total global CO2 emissions. So this is starting to make the case for why it's so important and so impactful to make buildings that are smart and that perform well. Okay, next slide. Coupled with this, we've seen escalating energy costs in the last 10 to 20 years, certainly in the last 10 years. And this graph actually is provided by Revision Heat. It actually ends in 2015. So, we've seen these trends just continue to go up. And so it makes the case not only for building homes and renovating homes to a higher standard where they require less of a heat load and require less to heat and cool them, but as you can see in this graph, heat pumps also have kind of remained level in this trend, and in fact, more recently have begun to trend down in costs. So this technology, heat pump technology that's more efficient and is going to use less energy to heat and cool a home, is in fact also a very cost-effective way to do so. Next slide. All right, so there again, some other trends we've seen have been escalating electrical prices. So in the last 10 years or so, they have not gone up quite as dramatically as they did in the early aughts, but they do continue to trend up. And here is a place where you can begin to see the opportunity in solar installations and in getting a home to net zero by essentially providing your own energy on site. You're able to offset your own output of costs or output of payments towards utilities as these costs begin to continue to rise. And if you make that investment in solar now, as opposed to 10, 20 years from now, you also are essentially locking yourself in at a fixed rate for electrical costs. And in many regions, particularly into Massachusetts and elsewhere, it's actually more cost effective to invest and amortize that investment in solar today than it is to just pay your local utility their cents per kilowatt rate, because you're going to do better with a solar system than you will by paying your local utility. Let's look at the next one. One of the reasons we're able to do that and that the numbers do work in favor of investing in solar now is because of the decreasing costs in solar panels. So it used to be that solar panels were either a luxury for those who could afford it, or we're sort of represented by the extremes of the marketplace. Nowadays, it's really the norm. It's something that we all have access to, and we all can certainly invest in through different mechanisms of financing or otherwise. And in many, many cases, it's net benefit to do so. So the decreasing cost in solar panels is another reason this is all more approachable than it used to be. And it also, because solar panels are a technology, it's very likely that those costs will continue to come down. So that's also very encouraging in the world of net zero and solar. Okay, next slide, please. The other thing that's really remarkable is that projections suggest that over the next 30 years, 3/4 of our built environment will either be new or renovated. So the onus is on us, certainly, as home buyers, home builders, home renovators, to make those renovations and to build that new construction as to high a degree of performance as we possibly can to make the best global impact in that 3/4 of the built environment. So that's just a really interesting fact or interesting statistic to weigh as you consider, while as an individual homeowner, you might feel as though your impact will be fairly minimal. As a collective, our impact can be very significant. if we do good home improvements and we do really, really good high performance new construction. Okay, next slide, please. So as far as a member of the marketplace, this is also something that's not going away anytime soon. Green building and the case for green building and the market interest in green building is only continuing to increase. We're seeing this in the marketplace, and Julia may be speaking to this a little bit as well, but just the general market interest and the resale value in homes that have higher performance aspects and features is very compelling and has been measured. So I've seen anywhere from 5 to 14% of added value on homes that are high performance when compared with similar comps in the marketplace. So there's certainly a value in the investment just in terms of your home ownership. Okay, next slide, please. So how do we do it? How do you either renovate your home to be a better performing home, or how do we build new construction to be better performing? The primary elements are envelope, windows and doors, and ensuring airtight construction. So on the envelope, that means robust insulation. In the homes that we build, we use dense packed cellulose. That's certainly something that's fairly accessible as a retrofit. But really getting your R values up to somewhere in the neighborhood of the mid 30s and up for your wall construction is going to get you towards a place where your home really doesn't need anywhere near as much heat or cooling as it might need today with older construction styles. So that insulation, getting those R values up in the walls as well as the basements and the roof is really critical for reducing the heat loads that your home requires. Furthermore, the windows and doors are a major improvement that can be made, as well as an important feature in new construction. So triple pane is really important, and windows that are made that have good air seals that aren't going to be very leaky is very important. So the less air you can lose through your envelope, through your windows, the more heat and cooling you can retain, the less that you have to supplement with through whatever system you use to heat or cool. And then the third image in this slide shows a blower door test being performed at a house. And that's a test, if you're not aware or haven't heard of blower door tests in the past, it essentially measures the overall air tightness of the home and is able to determine how many air changes per hour your house actually allows for, just in the sort of passive leakages that are within the envelope or in the windows and doors. So high performance homes generally strive for at least a 1.5 air changes per hour at the pressure that's used in the device. But the important thing is basically to minimize the passive leakage in your house and instead incorporate mechanical air changes such that you not only have controlled airflow in and out of your house, but you're preconditioning the air that you're bringing in, and therefore not making up for the losses of heat going out of the house or cold air going out of the house in hotter conditions. So envelope, windows and doors, and ensuring air tightness are three critical aspects to getting closer to net zero and getting to better performing homes. Next slide, please. The other critical factor is systems. So once you reduce the heat load in your home by increasing the R value to the shell, the basement, and the roof, you don't need to have a really robust furnace to generate the heat for your home. You can go with much more efficient systems, such as air source heat pumps. And those systems will run off electricity. So if you're using solar, then you can generate all the power needed to heat and cool your home. And these systems work really well for homes that are well insulated and have good air sealing. Likewise, because you're going to be doing a really good job of tightening up the home and making a good air seal, you will want to incorporate an HRV or an ERV, which exchanges that air, brings in the outside air, preconditions it with the outgoing inside air to make that thermal transfer. The air itself doesn't mix, but the thermal qualities do, so that the fresh air that's then introduced to the house is actually pre-warmed in the winter months or pre-cooled in the summer months, so that you have this constant circulation of fresh air that's filtered and also is controlled. And then for the hot water heaters, efficient hot water heaters are heat pump hot water heaters that use the same technology as the air source heat pumps, and it's an all-integrated unit. And those are excellent ways to increase efficiency for your hot water heating, whether or not you make improvements to the shell or the window packages of your home. So great technologies and really efficient systems coupled with a solid envelope are going to get you to net zero potentially. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick snapshot to have an understanding of how the homes that we do, which are new construction homes built to these standards that have just been shown, how they compare to a typical new home. So that's a code minimum newly constructed home, as well as an older existing home, such as, you know, what we see mostly here in Maine. So the homes that are built to the standards that we built are 3 times better than a typical new code built home and upwards of 5 times better than existing homes. So if whether you're renovating your existing home or building new construction, if you build to the standard, you stand to gain substantially over your current housing potentially. So it makes a dramatic impact on the utility costs. It makes a dramatic impact on just the global CO2 output that home is responsible for. Next slide, please. Okay, so I guess I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to say that, you know, this is just a quick summary slide that essentially wraps up what the point is in having a high performance home. They live better, they work better, and they last better. And then I believe this is my last slide, but oh, a couple more actually. So just the quick takeaway is when you make these improvements and you have a high performance home that operates much more efficiently, your total out-of-pocket costs, even with the capital costs of those improvements at the outset, your total out-of-pocket costs from a month-to-month basis actually are less than if you made no changes or if you built a brand new home to code minimum standards. So essentially, next slide, when you do these improvements or you build new construction, they're free. So, all right, thank you so much. I will wrap up and hand it over to Julia.
Thank you, Parlin. That was a great kickoff and clearly some compelling energy savings potential there. So just one note before we turn it over to Julia, it's great to see your questions coming through. If you did join us a little late, I would remind you that we are accepting questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to get to all of them after the presentations. And so at this point, I will hand it over to Julia Bassett Schwerin.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you so much. Following my colleague Parlin's excellent perspective from her work with new construction, I am going to focus on how to value and finance efficient and renewable energy retrofits. Next slide, please, Maggie. So there's a lot of reasons that you would want to do energy retrofits on your home. I'm going to just focus on the financial aspect of lowering your heating bills and getting more money at resale. Next slide, please. Housing expenses include principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and energy bills. Actually, your energy bills are the ones that you can afford to cut. Next slide, please. Before we dig in, I have been asked to talk briefly about what's a green broker. Many of my realtor colleagues understand green features, and many have taken my class on it, but like a big Girl Scout, I like earning badges. So 10 years ago, I earned the Green Broker designation from the National Association of Realtors, and I've kept it up every year. Being a green broker means that we know how the products we are selling work, how to determine value, how to communicate the value to others in the transaction so we can transfer the value to a new owner, how to attract financing to create value, and the new laws, programs, and policies that may impact the process and affect the value in the future. Next slide, please. We know how to populate the MLS greenfields to bring them to the attention of other agents as These fields do not show up in public search engines. Only realtors can see them. We look at trends in sold homes with green features in Maine. So for example, here, starting at 12 o'clock on this pie chart, and going clockwise around it, we'll start with solar PV, so solar photovoltaics is the green wedge at the top. Energy Star appliances are next, insulated foundations, low E windows, high efficiency water heaters, pellet stoves in 2018 were the biggest sector, followed by heat pumps, and the last wedge is heat pump water heaters. So now let's dig into getting some, no, next slide, please, thanks. Let's dig into getting some green for the green features. Next slide, please. At a minimum, your energy bill is your budget for investing in efficient renewable energy. You could always do more, but start with an energy audit. This will tell you where you can trim your fuel bill, by how much, and where your priorities are. Every building is different. There's great reward in getting an audit, and there's no substitute. The audit will tell you exactly where to air seal the building envelope, insulate the attic, the basement, the walls, caulk and weather strip every joint and hole, windows and doors. You must use an energy efficiency Maine approved contractor to get rebates, but if you don't care about those, you can do it yourself. It's a good idea once you've sealed your envelope to get a test for radon and to put in mechanical ventilation so that you can ensure that you've got a good indoor air quality. Next slide, please. So we start with weatherization, and then we move to electrification. That basically means swapping out heat pumps for combustion furnaces or boilers, or inefficient appliances like monitors or baseboard electric. Domestic hot water is 12% of your energy bill, so swap a heat pump water heater out to lower that bill. Space heating in Maine is the majority of your energy bill, so swap a couple of ductless mini split heat pumps for that. Lighting is 11% of the typical energy budget, so lower your electric bill by swapping LED light bulbs. In addition, you'll breathe easier and leverage Maine's incredible renewable grid, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide, please. So then once you've tightened up your building envelope and swapped out your combustion heat and hot water appliances for clean electric ones, you've lowered your energy bills as much as possible. Now you're ready for net zero energy, which, as Parlin said, which means you make as much energy as you consume. So you'll benefit from net metering, which means you can feed the grid all the solar that you make during the day that you didn't use, and at night you can get it back, basically using the grid as a ginormous battery. And if you get an electric vehicle, you can have free fuel for it. If you decide to get a battery pack, good news, if the grid goes down, your solar will still be charging. And if you don't, it won't. So that's a consideration. Next slide, please. After you make all these investments, will buyers want to pay more than if you had not? In this well-regarded survey by the National Association of Home Builders, 26% of millennials would pay up to $5,000 more, and 19% would pay over $15,000 more to save $1,000 annually in utility costs. So that's pretty good. Next slide, please. You won't want to leave any of this money on the table either. Efficiency Maine is a quasi-governmental organization that gives incentives on efficiency measures, which cost extra. Things that Bill Gates said in his most recent book on averting climate disaster have a green premium. Efficiency Maine offers 4 different rebates, and the government offers 4 different tax credits to reduce your tax bill. And if you're a lower income household, rebates can be even higher. Check with Efficiency Maine and with your accountant for exact information on this. Next slide, please. Keep all your energy bills from the last few years and all the ones that show that now your energy bills are lower. Keep your receipts so you can use them to demonstrate that you've made an investment in your property. And some of these studies here show that buildings with HERS and other ratings and certifications have been shown nationally to sell for more. We don't have any studies like these yet in Maine, but my experience with selling green properties is that we can get the money out. Next slide, please. If you match your energy project costs after rebates, credits, and deductions to the energy bills that they offset, you'll have a valuable building. When the loans are paid off, your operating expenses go way down, and when the property is sold, the value will go up. So these are some of the principles that I think are just fundamental, and a great example, I think, are the mill buildings of New England that are now being turned into living, working, and retail spaces. They're a testament to the timeless value of investing in the structure. Next slide, please. So, like knowing how many miles per gallon a car gets before you buy it, you should know the energy score of your building as a buyer. And as a seller, you should tell that, and your broker should sell that to the buyer. I mean, let's face it, nobody drives up to a house the night before a showing and says, "Oh, honey, would you look at the air sealing and insulation this place has? We've got to have it." No, you have to document it to be seen. And when you document your investment and you put a label or a rating on it, you get to leverage all the reputational branding that brands like Energy Star and HERS have, with millions of homes already rated. So it's a really worthwhile thing to do. And next slide, please. Finally, what's to come in the future? So this is a map of all the grid-tied renewable energy in northern New England. And the good news is, well, the bad news is that 2/3 of Maine homes are heated with oil, and we import all of our fossil fuel, and it makes for terrible trade imbalance in the state. But the good news is already 80% of our electricity is made from renewable sources, hydro, wind, biomass, and grid-tied solar is coming on strong with hundreds of megawatts. Offshore wind is coming on strong with tens of gigawatts of capacity. So we're really going to have an incredible resource here in the state with renewable energy. Other things include, we have new building energy codes that will require all new construction to be increasingly as efficient as the most efficient homes built today. The Maine Climate Council recommendations that will start rolling out in new legislation in August, with funding for weatherization and electrification. One Climate Future is the plan for Portland and South Portland, which has over 100 measures it will be taking to make its buildings and infrastructure carbon neutral and resilient. Build Back Better is the infrastructure and climate plan being rolled out soon by the Biden administration. Hopefully we'll have more funding available for making buildings more efficient later this year. And finally, the Green Bank, which will hopefully be both a federal and state lending authority to increase funding of weatherization, electrification, and other measures. So last slide, please. Thank you, Maggie. In conclusion, I appreciate so much this opportunity to be with all of you. Thank Heather for hosting. Thank you, Maggie, for organizing, promoting, and thank you, Parlin and Rob, for your spot-on remarks. I look forward to answering your questions. And Rob, over to you.
Great, thank you, Julia. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending this great event. It's going to be the start of a very good long-running series, I think. I'm here to present the appraiser's perspective. So I'm going to start with my thought processes when I get an assignment request from typically a lender, although it can be a private homeowner as well. I start to think about, what data do I need to have? And that's true of any assignment that I take on. But when it comes to looking at a energy efficient, high performance dwelling, there are some other things that I'm looking for as well that hopefully start to get collected in the early side of the process. So first slide, please, Maggie. So data sources of things. Obviously, an architect, a builder, the general items. If it's new construction, well, then I'm going to need a whole set of building plans, specifications. I want to know the size of the dwelling, its design. Is there a deck, a garage? How many bedrooms, bathrooms, all those typical type of things. But also with a high performance dwelling, there's some additional needs that I need to have to know more about the property. Some of these specific special items related to it. Construction methods. Is it a modular high performance dwelling such as BrightBuilt or some others? Is it double wall construction? Is it SIPs, structural insulated panels, and so forth? Is there some air sealing specifications that I can be provided? What are the windows like? What are the insulation R values like? What about the heating and cooling system? Is there something special about that? There are heat or energy recovery ventilators, as well as things like, is there going to be photovoltaics, a PV system, a solar panels on the roof or mounted somewhere on the property? Speaking of photovoltaics, the system specifications. I'd like to know how big the system is, what the warranty is, who is the manufacturer, what is the warranty, and who is the manufacturer of the inverter, which changes the DC current to AC current. I can work with that information, that type of information coming from the PV installer. From the property owner, let's say you're starting this process and you have some of these documents. You want to provide that to your lender, because they in turn will hopefully provide that to someone like myself. If your home is already an existing property, you go to refinance that property, you're going to want to provide that information to the appraiser to say, it's a 2,000 square foot home with 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms, but it also has this construction type and these features that collectively make this home highly efficient. And here's this information to verify and support that claim about the property. If the property is being sold, I'm going to look to the Realtor and the multiple listing service, as Julia mentioned, to look for properties in the market that have sold with green features. It allows me to do a better job in my analysis in appraising that property. Next slide, please. Documentation. Appraisers are always really concerned with these properties with, we want to have verifiable information. Someone saying, well, yeah, it saves me roughly, $1,200 a year in my utility bills. It's kind of it could be $1,200, it could be $800, it could be $1,600. Having some documentation that allows us to see that that's verified and confirmed is a great piece of information to have. Are there green certifications or energy labels that the home has been put through to reach a particular standard? As Julia mentioned, that is a part of the selling of the home, part of letting the general public know about those features of the home, but it also alerts the appraiser that there's something a little more to that property and that we need to consider those things much more in the analysis. Energy modeling is a great thing that I've requested numerous times, and sometimes it's been provided to me as part of the initial package. Energy modeling coming from the builder, HERS rater, energy auditor. On the slide is an example of one which I happen to have received on a project in Cumberland, Maine, on a BrightBuilt project. In the blue box there, it shows the proposed BrightBuilt project energy coming from the various sources on the left. And on the far right-hand side would be a code compliant home of the same size and its energy needs. So within this energy modeling that I was provided, and this is just a little screenshot of a 4 or 5 page document, it really very clearly showed me how much more energy efficient this home was going to be based on this initial energy modeling. And with that, I could work on some of the analysis from the energy savings. Next slide, please. So now that I've gathered up some of the information, some of the tools that I use in my appraisals, starting with my personal favorite, of course, because I'm a member of the Appraisal Institute holding 2 of their designations, is the Residential Green and Energy Efficient Addendum. This is just the very top of this 6-page form with 4 pages of information on the property I'm appraising. It covers a number of things and really is a great tool to inform the appraiser, inform the lender, inform the potential buyer about the energy efficient items in that home. Through its 6-page form, it covers things such as the green certification. Is it Energy Star? Is it Zero Energy Ready from the Department of Energy? Passive House? Is it LEED certified? It discusses energy labels, a HERS rating, or a home energy score. It has areas to list information on the solar PV system and so forth. That has been provided to me by builders, been provided to me by homeowners. Sometimes it's a combination of these professionals who have the different pieces, and it gets filled out and it gets added to my appraisal reports, and it allows the reader of the report to really get into what is there within the home. Next slide, please, Maggie. Again, the energy modeling with the little snapshot I had previously shown and discussed. It's a great thing to have going in. The information from the solar system up on the roof, I use a tool called PV Value that allows me to get a range of value for just the PV system in the energy savings that it brings to that property and that homeowner. Again, that data that I need, you know, the size of the system, its orientation, what's the warranty, what's the current utility rate from Central Maine Power. That's the rate that they're going to be saving. That goes into essentially this tool as a spreadsheet and takes that future savings based on the power system, and it converts it to a present value, which is something I can work with in my analysis as an adjustment to comparable sales. Another tool that I have is the ResNet portal, the Residential Energy Services Network portal. Those are the people that with HERS raters rate the home to their standard. A collaboration between ResNet and the Appraisal Institute allows members such as myself to log in and be able to do a search by state, by county, by town, by address on any property that may be rated in there for a HERS score. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through the traditional valuation methods, cost approach, cost to acquire the land and build the equivalent replacement. That's a good test of reasonableness for the sales comparison approach. That is when I or someone like Julia are going to be taking a look at comparable properties. What have they sold for? How do they compare to my property? Based on a principle of substitution. And it's effectively how we try to shop for any major purchase, or how we should, certainly. Lastly is an income approach, and this is where the PV value and the energy modeling come into play in my reports, because that's where I can take the savings that you have in your home compared to a comparable property and quantify that savings as a method of making an adjustment just for all those energy efficient features. Some appraisers may consider that to be quality of the construction. It is in a way. My reports, I tend to think of the quality as the finish. You know, it's hardwood, ceramic tile, granite counters, those type of things. Whereas I'm trying to really isolate based on an income approach, quantifying that savings, what all this construction does for you as a homeowner in lowering your utility bill, going out a number of years, and then discounting that back to a present value today. Next slide, please. Lastly is a big consideration for an appraiser is competency. That's part of our ethical standards, our professional practice requirements. Appraiser has to ask themselves if they can accept an assignment. I'm a residential appraiser. I'm not going to appraise the office building that I am currently in here in Scarborough. I'm not trained. I don't have that education. So I'm not going to accept that type of work. There are things I can do to acquire that competency to get up to speed on how to appraise an office building. However, the lender needs me to get the assignment done within a certain time frame. And a lender is also under the guidance and the requirement that they must engage a qualified appraiser. So for them, they need to be aware of what your property is so they can select the appropriate appraiser for that assignment. And lastly, on competency, there's a realtor consideration there that to assist me in my competency, Anytime I come up on a property that is energy efficient, I'm asking the realtor, do you have documentation on this property? That's going to aid them in marketing that property and aid their client in their service to their client. And it's also going to aid me or the next appraiser when that property sells to be aware that it has those energy efficient features. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Those were some fantastic presentations, and we have a bunch of awesome questions. So I am going to start with a question for Parlin. Question is, what sort of uptick have you experienced at BrightBuilt Home this year? And do you have any indication that this is driven, at least in part, from an increased interest in high-performing homes versus the draw that Maine real estate is seeing across the board right now?
We absolutely have seen a very substantial uptick this year. Our traffic has doubled in 2021 from where it was in 2020, and it was still fairly robust and strong in 2020, certainly pre-pandemic and even through much of the pandemic. So we absolutely have seen a very, very marked shift in the traffic through our office and interest in our product. I attribute that to both the general marketplace as well as really all of anyone coming through our office, I believe is interested in high performance, because that's exactly what we do. So it's not happenstance, it's not coincidence, they're looking specifically to build new homes, and the increase in traffic is due in part to the overall increase, but their interest in BrightBuilt is indicative of the market interest in high performance homes.
Great, thank you. Next question is for Rob. So the question is, how is this approach actually imparted to the local appraisers in Maine? It says, this is such a new way of thinking from my experience. So how are appraisers in Maine getting educated on this approach? You're muted.
There it is, sorry. Thank you, that's a good question. Appraisers are trained on the three approaches that I mentioned. Selecting the income approach to quantify that savings that the home has from being energy efficient compared to a code-built dwelling is a little bit of a new approach. Not all residential appraisers are comfortable with that, but it is no different than the office building that I'm in. If the landlord, the owner, were to do some improvements here and lower his expenses annually because of energy efficiency, that would affect his bottom line. After he collects our rent and he pays his expenses, he has lower heating bills, that's going to affect his bottom line. And a commercial appraiser would appraise this office building using an income approach and bringing that future revenue stream back to a value today. What I do is I'm taking a little tiny snapshot of that in that utility savings and using that in an income approach, and then incorporating that as an adjustment to the comparable sales that I use. Again, it has to come down to an understanding of the income approach fairly well, and how to work that into the residential appraisal and the sales comparison approach. There are courses out there on the income approach for appraisers. Every appraiser has to take some of those initially to get licensed and then move on to certification if they choose to within their state that they work. I think it's just a matter of the appraiser being willing to open up their thinking a little bit about the income approach and how to apply it in this particular case. So I hope that answered your question.
Let's see, Julia. When listing a home for sale, are there voluntary disclosures on how much fuel it uses? And do you think that there will come a time when energy disclosures are mandatory for selling a home?
Wow, that's a great question. There is a disclosure form. It's voluntary, and it lists the water in, the wastewater out, the heating system, any hazardous materials, and then general information about the property. And under the heating system, the seller is asked to disclose an annual amount of heating fuel used for every appliance that's in the house. If they don't know, like if they're renting the house and the tenants are paying the heat, they're supposed to find out. If they don't, the listing broker is supposed to find out. If they don't, the buyer's broker is supposed to find out. And yet sometimes we just don't find out. And as far as mandatory disclosures, that's already happening. The other Portland already has it. They're requiring a home energy score at the point of sale, and other cities like Austin, Texas, and Berkeley, California, and some states like Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut are in the process of doing it. Austin and Berkeley already have it, and it's amazing hearing the effect it's had on the Portland, Oregon market. Everyone's comparing their scores. If they don't like their score, they're fixing up their property before they go to market because they're embarrassed and they don't want to be penalized, in the price. And it's having exactly the intended effect as far as what we've heard. So it's probably coming.
Great to hear. This one wasn't directed at anyone in particular, so I'll throw it out there, and if it resonates, speak up. So the question is, we live in Lubec, Maine, and it does not look like there are any sustainable energy houses in town. How can you compare the value of a sustainable home in this market when there is nothing to compare it to?
See Julia kind of nodding her head a little bit, so I think she's waiting for me.
I'm waiting for you.
It's not an uncommon thing in Maine, certainly. Julia had slides, and I know I've read other studies where other areas of the country through the MLS, they've been able to have enough homes that have sold that have been energy efficient to compare median prices, median days on market of those homes against comparable homes, homes 5 years old or less who are 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, say, and compare median sale prices and median days on market. And they've been able to come up with some differences percentage-wise in those homes and their price points. But those are other areas of the country, much more data. We just don't seem to have that threshold here in Maine just yet, like they do in other areas of the country. There have been a few properties that I have appraised where I've gone into the MLS and I found a property that has been high performance, and I've got some information on that. I've compared it to a comparable home in the area that is not, and come up with some range of percentages. There's like 1 or 2 pairings in Freeport, and then there's 1 or 2 in Arundel, and they're kind of widespread. But if that percentage is reasonably accurate, reasonably close to each other in those different data sets, you could make the assumption that in a Lubec market, Eastport market, Down East market, Aroostook County market, that maybe the relationship of that percentage would be the same to arrive at an adjustment to show that difference between the two types of properties.
All right, I'm going to give this one to you, Parlin, because I know that you and I have had conversations about this before. The question is, what does the group consider a reasonable break-even period? And I know that you don't like the term break-even as much as approaching it from a different angle, so I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, break-even, I think, is also used frequently in conjunction with payback period. Those terms are often perceived as, the appropriate valuation of the investment in question, whatever it is, whether it's energy performance or otherwise. I personally, and I think in our industry, both those terms do end up being a little bit flawed because they're misleading in the overall value of the improvements made in some part in ways that are immeasurable, as well as in ways that aren't really consistent with how we spend our money. So to invest money in home improvements or to invest the additional capital cost in building a new home, new construction that's high performance, it will translate, of course, generally into either a home equity loan or a mortgage. So you will see an increased cost in your monthly payment for your home equity loan or your mortgage for having spent the extra money in making those improvements. But as one of the slides in my presentation indicated, that combined with your actual monthly out-of-pocket costs for those utilities and the cost of these utilities, generally, and this gets at what Julia was saying as well, very frequently is you end up on the better side of the coin. So you end up actually saving money for your monthly out-of-pocket costs than you would have been spending if you hadn't made the improvements at all. And so in that instance, if you take just the value of the cost or just the cost of what you invested in the improvements, and you look at that and try to extrapolate that over a certain number of years for the payback period, it's a misrepresentation of the actual monthly expenditures that you're actually making for your household. And in many cases, we find, certainly in a side-by-side comparison for new construction, that you're saving money out of the gates. So from our standpoint, there is no payback period because your payback period is immediate. So yeah, we don't have a quantification of that metric that we apply to our work and our houses because we see that instantaneous benefit. But the other thing to consider, even if you do want to look at it through that lens, is the value that's hard to quantify from monetary standpoints. So the value of a healthier home, the value of fresh air, the value of being comfortable in your home, the value of quiet and sort of the peace and quiet of an improved envelope and better windows. So those are added values that are difficult to quantify on a monetary basis. So.
Great, thank you. This one's specifically for Julia. So the question is, where'd it go? You mentioned millennial buyers being willing to potentially pay more for an efficient property. What if you own a home that has a lot of efficiency updates, but the cosmetic finishes are out of date? I hope that this question is applicable to other audience members with so many other older homes here in Maine.
That's a legitimate question, and I will say that it depends on your buyers. A lot of buyers are very conscious of the efficiency of the property, and a lot of buyers just want, the shiplap and the quartz, and they're just not able to think about anything else. But again, it goes back to how you sell your property, what it is you emphasize. If you can demonstrate that they'll save money in it, you're going to get some amount of interest. You won't get everybody. You just, there's just too many people that are superficial about their taste and what resonates with them.
Rob, what do I do if the energy efficient features of my home are not reflected in the appraisal report?
Well, let me start with if you're going with a lender, the client of the appraiser, first of all, and this is just a little appraisal 101 on our principles, is who is our client. The party that engages the appraiser, that hires the appraiser, is their client, and I have ethical obligations to report only back to my client. So you don't want to necessarily go speak to the appraiser again. I would say, hey, lender, I've read my appraisal report. I pointed out these features, had this documentation for the appraiser, and it's not showing up in my appraisal report either. And there's two different categories here. There's either There's a value component of what the appraiser attributes to it, or just noting these features within the appraisal. I would ask the lender to contact the appraiser and say, hey, the homeowner made comments to us, provided documentation that the home is energy efficient. It has a PV system. It has high efficiency windows. It has better insulation. It has a low ACH score that make it have lower utility bills. And we don't see that at all in the appraisal report. Why not? Being direct and asking that question, why not? The appraiser should hopefully go back and do some revision to that report to include those items. Number two, they should then have a discussion as to how they reflect that in the value, if they can, within that market area. It brings me back, though, to my final slide on competency, and that perhaps the appraiser should have recused themselves from that assignment. If the appraiser gets a phone call and says, hey, I've got a high performance dwelling here. If you haven't, as an appraiser, had education in that or experience with it, you probably should decline the assignment. Say, oh, thank you very much, but send me the next one. If the appraiser proceeds in doing that assignment and those items are not noted in the appraisal, let alone whether there's value attributed or not, I would say that potentially the appraiser has produced a misleading report because it doesn't correctly identify the subject property that they have been asked to appraise. And that's a licensing ethical issue if the lender chooses to go there. So keep his hand.
We have time for just one more question. Did you want to follow up to that, Julia?
I just wanted to say that as a seller, you can instruct your agent, your broker, to make sure that in the contract it specifies a competent appraiser. And if you have significant green features, you can specify a competent green appraiser, or appraiser that knows how to fill out the addendum, knows how to do the solar valuation. That can backfire on you. It has for me. If you can't get a qualified appraiser to go where your building is, then you're going to have to back down on that. But you can ask for it in the contract.
Great. We are actually at time, so I apologize that we did not get to all of the questions. The presenters have agreed to share all of their contact information, so we will be sending that in the follow-up email. At this point, I would like to say a huge thank you for joining us for the first episode of the Home and Energy Chats. I hope you learned some helpful new information. I want to thank our sponsors again, Royal River Heat Pumps and Bath Savings. I want to say a big thank you to Maggie Perkins, who you can't see. She's making everything work behind the scenes and has just been managing everything so beautifully. So thank you, Maggie. I would love to thank our panelists for sharing your expertise with us this evening. We have a special thank you gift that we'll be mailing to each of you, a treat from our favorite local chocolatier, Dean Sweets in Portland, as well as a complimentary subscription or gift subscription to the Green and Healthy Maine magazines. Let's see, please mark your calendars for the next episode of the Home and Energy Chats. The Future of Cars is Electric on April 27th at 6 p.m. You will find all of the details for that program, including the full calendar of events, on our website, greenmainhomes.com. And lastly, you will see a brief survey pop up when we close the webinar. We'd love to hear your feedback on today's session. It is the very first one of our series, and your feedback helps us craft future programming to meet your needs. So thank you again. Thanks to our presenters. I really appreciate your time, and hope everyone has a great evening.